He was born into wealth, yet lived a life trapped in silence, a boy who had everything money could buy except the ability to walk. For 8 long years, no doctor could explain why, until one innocent child, covered in mud and kindness, uncovered the truth that had been buried beneath lies and time. What she found didn't just change his life, it changed the meaning of love itself. And before we go on, let me wish you health and peace. Tell me, from which country and at what time are you watching this story? Morning came softly to Mercer Island, the kind of October morning when the mist still clung to Lake Washington like a half-forgotten dream. The Thornwell estate sat quiet by the water, its wide windows gathering the pale light as if the house itself were waiting to breathe again. Inside, the coffee pot murmured its steady song, filling the kitchen with the scent of roasted beans and solitude. Elias Thornwell stood by the counter, one hand wrapped around a cup that had long gone cold. The man was only 40, but the gray in his hair seemed older than that. From where he stood, he could see the reflection of the lake rippling against the glass, steady, indifferent. He had built empires from nothing, sold them, and built again. People called him a genius in the press. They called him untouchable. But genius, it turned out, made poor company at breakfast. Aiden's wheelchair creaked softly from the next room. The boy, 8 years old and bright as morning, sat by the window tracing fog lines on the glass. His legs, thin and unmoving, rested beneath a blanket. Elias watched him a moment longer than he meant to. "You okay there, champ?" he asked. Aiden looked over his shoulder, offered a small smile. "Just watching the fog. Looks like the clouds came down to visit." Elias tried to return the smile, but couldn't quite manage it. "Guess they missed you." He meant it kindly, but the words fell heavy. The silence afterward was broken only by the faint ticking of the clock above the fireplace. That clock had been Isabella's favorite, a wedding gift from her father. Elias hadn't wounded in years, yet it still kept time, stubborn as memory. Maria Martha, the housekeeper, entered quietly with a basket of fresh linens. She was in her 60s now, soft-spoken but steady, the only person who dared tell Elias when he needed sleep. "Mr. Thornwell," she said gently. "Dr. Vale called this morning. She'd like to adjust Aiden's medication again." Elias's jaw tightened. "Another adjustment?" "Yes, sir." She said it might help with his muscle tone. He nodded absently, staring down into his cup. Adjustments never helped. Dozens of doctors, hundreds of tests. Every one of them left him with the same hollow phrase, "No medical reason." Somewhere between science and heartbreak, his wife had died bringing their son into the world, and the boy had never taken a step since. Martha lingered. "You'll be at the tower today?" Elias sighed. "Board meeting. New investment pitch. Same noise. Maybe stay for dinner tonight, I'm making chicken pot pie." He looked up, and for the briefest moment, something like gratitude softened his face. Maybe. When she left, the house seemed to grow quiet again, its halls long and echoing. Elias walked into his study, large windows, polished wood, framed degrees that no longer meant much. On his desk lay a photograph of Isabella holding baby Aiden. She was laughing, head tilted toward the camera, sunlight in her hair. The picture had been taken 1 week before she died. He traced a finger across the frame. "I'm trying, Bella," he murmured. "I really am." Aiden's laughter rang out suddenly from the living room, bright and unexpected. Elias turned, startled. Through the doorway, he saw a small girl, blonde, about 7, standing by his son's chair, holding a toy airplane. Hazel Brooke, Martha's granddaughter. She visited sometimes after school, fearless and talkative, in ways adults no longer were. "Morning, Mr. Thornwell," she chirped. "Aiden says this airplane can fly across the lake. Want to see?" Elias blinked, disoriented by the sound of such confidence inside his quiet house. "Across the lake, huh? That's quite a distance." Hazel grinned. "You never know till you throw it." She wound up, threw, and the paper plane caught a draft from the fireplace vent, spiraling high before landing near Elias's feet. Both children laughed. He picked it up, the corners bent, the ink smeared where small fingers had pressed too hard. Aiden plus Hazel's plane was written in crooked letters along one wing. Elias looked at his son, who was smiling wide, cheeks flushed with the kind of joy he hadn't seen in years. For a heartbeat, the cold mansion felt like home again. "Guess it did make it halfway," he said softly, handing the plane back. Hazel shrugged. Halfway still farther than yesterday. That small sentence stayed with him long after she left. Halfway farther than yesterday. He repeated it under his breath while watching the children play Hazel, pushing Aiden's wheelchair across the rug, both laughing at something only they understood. Later that afternoon, when the children had gone outside with Martha, Elias stood by the window overlooking the lake. The mist had lifted, leaving behind a quiet silver light. He felt something inside him shift, not enough to name, but enough to notice. And when his phone rang, Dr. Vale again. Her tone brisk, clinical. Elias hesitated before answering. Outside, Aiden's laughter carried across the water like an echo from another life. The afternoon faded slowly, turning the lake from silver to slate. Elias remained at his desk long after the call ended, papers untouched. Dr. Vale had spoken for 20 minutes about dosages, neural pathways, and hope dressed up in medical terms. He had answered politely, promised to review her notes, and hung up before his voice betrayed him. The truth was simpler than any prescription. He was tired. Tired of sterile words and empty reassurances. When he finally stepped outside, the chill bit at his skin. The wind carried the scent of pine and wet leaves, and from the far end of the garden came the faint sound of children's voices. He followed the laughter down the stone path to where the yard met the lake. There, under the drooping branches of a willow, Hazel was showing Aiden how to fold another airplane. "See? You gotta crease it right down the middle," she instructed. Aiden watched her hands closely, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Like this? Almost. Here, let me." She leaned over, their heads nearly touching. For a moment, Elias forgot the wheelchair, the appointments, all of it. There was only the rustle of paper, the giggle of a child, and the lake breathing in rhythm with them. When they noticed him standing there, Hazel waved. "We're building a fleet. You can be the captain if you want." Elias smiled faintly. "A fleet, huh? Sounds ambitious." "Uh-huh?" Aiden looked up, eyes shining. "Mom used to say I'd fly someday. Maybe this is how I start." Something inside Elias tightened, then eased. He knelt beside the chair, adjusting the blanket around his son's legs. "Maybe it is, kiddo. Every pilot starts somewhere." They launched the new plane together. It soared higher than the first, gliding out over the grass before landing near the rose bushes that Isabella had planted years ago. Hazel cheered. "See? Farther than halfway this time." End of. Martha called them in for supper. Inside, the smell of chicken pot pie filled the kitchen. The light had turned amber, touching the wooden cabinets and the photographs along the wall. One of them showed Isabella standing in that very spot, flour on her hands, laughing while Aiden, still a baby, reached for her. Elias's chest ached at the memory. They ate together at the big oak table, the way families do when they're not sure if they still are one. Hazel talked about school, about the art contest she wanted to win. Aiden listened with rapt attention, asking questions. Elias found himself smiling without realizing it. After dinner, Hazel helped Martha with the dishes, humming an old tune under her breath. Elias carried Aiden to the living room and set him by the fireplace. The fire crackled softly. Shadows danced along the walls. "Dad," Aiden said quietly, "do you think Mom can see us?" Elias stared into the fire. "I'd like to think so. Then she knows I'm okay?" He reached over, brushing a strand of hair from the boy's forehead. "She knows. She always knew." Aiden nodded, satisfied, and soon drifted toward sleep, his head tilting against the chair. Elias watched the flames curl and pop. For the first time in years, the silence in the room didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace, waiting to be heard. Later, when he carried Aiden upstairs, Hazel stood by the staircase with a towel still in her hands. "He's really brave," she whispered. Elias paused. "Yeah, braver than I ever was." She looked up at him, her green eyes bright and serious. "You're brave too, Mr. Thornwell. You stayed." He didn't know what to say to that. The words followed him down the hallway like a prayer he didn't deserve. In Aiden's room, the boy stirred as Elias laid him on the bed. The nightlight, shaped like a tiny moon, glowed softly on the wall. Elias tucked the blanket around him, listening to the even rhythm of his breathing. He thought of Isabella again, her voice, her laughter, the promise they never got to keep. Downstairs, he poured himself one last cup of coffee. The clock above the mantel ticked steadily, its hands moving through another hour of a life that still refused to stop. Through the window, he could see the lake dark and still, the moon's reflection trembling on its surface. Outside, Hazel's paper planes lay scattered across the grass, glinting faintly under the porch light. He almost stepped outside to collect them, then stopped. Maybe it was better to leave them there. Small white shapes, waiting for morning proof that something hopeful had finally landed in this house again. He turned off the lamp and whispered to the quiet room. Halfway farther than yesterday, huh? For the first time, he believed it. Morning broke over Mercer Island with a faint gold haze, sunlight sliding between cedar branches and spilling onto the Thornwell driveway. The house was quiet, except for the soft whir of Aiden's wheelchair motor. He was tracing patterns in the dew with a stick, waiting for Hazel to arrive before school. Martha moved briskly around the kitchen, humming an old hymn, while Elias read the paper he didn't really see. Headlines blurred. Global markets rise. Seattle Council debates. New waterfront. None of it mattered. His mind was on the sound of his son's laugh yesterday, the first in months, and the girl who'd drawn it out of him. The doorbell chimed. Hazel's small voice carried from the porch. "Morning, Mr. Thornwell. I brought muffins. Grandma baked too many again." Elias smiled despite himself. "You're going to spoil us, kiddo. Come on in." Hazel stepped out of the autumn light, a paper bag in her arms, and her hair braided loosely. "They're blueberry. Grandma says they'll make you feel human." "Then I'll take 2, he said, pouring her a glass of milk. The scene felt domestic, impossibly ordinary, the kind of morning he used to imagine but never got back after Isabella's death. Aiden wheeled in, cheeks flushed. "Hazel says we should explore the garden after breakfast." Elias hesitated, glancing toward the tall hedges near the back of the property. "Stay where I can see you. Some areas haven't been cleared in years." "We will," Hazel promised. She had that quick assurance of children who never doubted they'd be safe. They left through the patio doors while Martha fussed with plates. Elias lingered at the window again, coffee in hand. The children's laughter drifted across the yard, bright against the low hum of a plane somewhere above the lake. Then he saw them veer toward the old stone wall, the same one he'd avoided since Isabella's burial. "Careful by the roses," he called, voice raised but gentle. Hazel waved back. "Got it." He told himself to relax. They were kids. Still, something in him tightened as he watched Hazel kneel near the ivy, brushing away dirt with curious fingers. Aiden pointed at something. She dug deeper. Elias set down his cup. The air seemed to thicken. Hazel's small hands lifted an object, something dark and glinting. She looked from it to Aiden, then up toward the house. Even from that distance, Elias saw the change in her face. Surprise, then worry. He was already moving before thought caught up across the deck. Down the steps, heart pounding. The damp earth clung to his shoes as he reached them. Hazel stood beside the wheelchair, mud on her knees. In her open palm lay a silver locket, tarnished and familiar. The breath left his lungs. "Where did you find that?" His voice came out low, almost hoarse. "In the dirt," Hazel whispered. "It was under the roots. Aiden said it might be his mom's." Elias knelt, hands trembling as he took it. The hinge squeaked open. 2 photos smiled back, his own younger face and Isabella's radiant one. Behind her picture was a folded scrap of paper, stained brown by soil. He unfolded it slowly. 3 words in Isabella's handwriting stared up at him. "Help me, please." The world tilted. The lake wind roared in his ears. He heard Hazel ask softly, "Mr. Thornwell, are you okay?" But he couldn't answer. He looked at the ground where the locket had lain. The soil was disturbed, freshly broken in a long seam along the wall. A memory surfaced, Isabella planting roses there before Aiden was born, laughing that the spot would always be ours. Now, under that same earth, something else waited. "Go back to the house," Elias said quietly. Hazel blinked. "But—" "Now, sweetheart, take Aiden with you, please." His tone left no room for question. She obeyed, pushing the chair toward the patio, glancing back once, uncertain. When they were gone, Elias dropped to his knees and began to dig with his bare hands. The earth was cold and wet, clinging to his cuffs. But he kept going until his fingers struck wood old, soft, the size of a shoebox. He pried it open. Inside, bundles of letters tied with fading ribbon. His breath caught. On the top envelope, October 15, 8 years ago. He unfolded it, and Isabella's voice returned to him through ink and trembling paper. "William, if you're reading this, then something terrible has happened." Elias's vision blurred. The sky above him was gray now, heavy with coming rain. He clutched the letters to his chest and whispered, "Oh, Bella, what did they do to you?" A gust of wind tore across the garden, scattering rose petals like ashes. The first raindrop hit the back of his hand, cold as truth. The rain came harder. Elias didn't move, even when thunder rolled across the lake. Mud streaked his hands and the letters, but he didn't care. He read by the dim light from the house, his voice breaking with every line. Isabella's words painted a story he could hardly breathe, through fear, betrayal, the doctor she'd trusted, the secretary who had smiled through her death. By the time he finished the second letter, the box beside him was half full of water. He gathered everything and stumbled toward the mansion, shoes squelching on the path. Martha met him at the back door, alarmed. "Mr. Thornwell, Lord, what happened? You're soaked through." He pushed past her gently, his voice shaking. "Where's Aiden?" "In the den with Hazel. She's reading to him." "Keep them there. Don't let anyone in. Not Dr. Vale, not anyone, understand?" Martha nodded, frightened but resolute. Elias disappeared down the hall, clutching the letters like evidence of a ghost. In his study, he spread them across the desk, careful not to tear the damp pages. Candlelight flickered against the words, making the ink seem alive. He read until the world fell away, Isabella describing strange pills, dizziness, fear, her suspicions about Dr. Vale. The final note, written the day before she went into labor. "If I don't survive, please protect our son. Find the truth. They're hiding something under the roses." He sat back, chest tight, staring at her handwriting. The clock ticked softly, marking the moment his old life ended and another began. From the hall came light footsteps. Hazel stood there, clutching the doorframe, her face pale but steady. "Mr. Thornwell, are you mad at us for finding it?" He looked up, startled by the gentleness in her voice. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong." "I didn't mean to dig there. I just wanted to show Aiden the worms after the rain." He almost smiled. "Sometimes the smallest accidents show us what's been hiding for years." She crept closer, peering at the open letters. "Is that from his mom?" "Yes." He hesitated, then handed her one of the envelopes. "From Isabella. She was trying to tell me something before she died." Hazel read the first line softly, lips moving as she sounded out the words. "She was scared." Elias's throat tightened. She was, but she was brave, too. Braver than I ever gave her credit for. Hazel looked up, eyes wide. "What are you going to do now?" He folded the papers carefully, voice low. "Find out the truth. For her and for him." From the den came the faint sound of Aiden's laughter, the kind of laughter that made the house breathe again. Elias rose, wiped his hands, and walked toward the sound. Hazel followed. Aiden looked up when they entered. "Dad, did you see? Hazel read me that funny poem about a frog in a tuxedo." Elias smiled faintly. "Sounds like a classy frog." The boy laughed again, then frowned. "Dad, are you okay? You look different." He knelt beside the wheelchair, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm fine, kiddo. Just thinking about Mom." Aiden's expression softened. "I miss her." "Me too." Elias's voice was almost a whisper. "But she left us something we weren't supposed to find." Hazel leaned in. "Like a treasure?" Elias nodded slowly. "Exactly like a treasure." Aiden smiled, satisfied by that answer, and reached for Hazel's hand. She squeezed back. Elias watched them both, two small lights cutting through the dim. In that moment he knew the truth wouldn't stay buried much longer. Outside, the storm was breaking. The rain slowed to a whisper against the windows. Elias looked toward the lake, its surface glimmering under a single streak of moonlight. For years, he'd believed that peace came from forgetting. Now, he understood it came from remembering. He turned off the lamp, letting the quiet settle again. "Get some rest, both of you," he said softly. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Hazel guided the wheelchair toward the hallway. As they disappeared into the glow of the nightlight, Elias returned to the desk, gathered the letters, and locked them in the top drawer. His reflection in the window stared back at him, pale and haunted but awake. The truth was out there, waiting to be unearthed. And for the first time, he was ready to face it. The morning after the storm came clear and cold, the kind of autumn light that makes every leaf on Mercer Island look freshly painted. The Thornwell house stood calm, as if nothing had changed, but inside, something had shifted forever. Elias was awake before dawn. He had read the letters again, every page, every loop of Isabella's handwriting, until he knew the words by heart. When the first light touched the lake, he folded them back into the box, tied the faded ribbon, and placed it in his briefcase. He dressed with quiet purpose, gray suit, blue tie, the armor of a man who once controlled empires. But as he stood before the mirror, the reflection that looked back wasn't the same. There were lines around his eyes he didn't remember earning, and beneath the surface, a calm determination that hadn't been there since the day Isabella died. Downstairs, Martha was setting out breakfast. "Coffee's fresh, sir," she said softly. "And Hazel's already walked Aiden to the dock to feed the ducks." "Thank you." Elias took the mug but didn't drink. His voice was steady now. "Martha, do you still have Dr. Vale's number?" She hesitated. "Of course. She called last night to check on Aiden. Call her back. Tell her I'd like to meet at the clinic this afternoon." Martha looked uncertain. "Everything all right?" "Not yet," he said, "but it will be." He left before the conversation could continue. Outside, his car waited, sleek, black, the sort of thing meant for boardrooms and power lunches. Today, it felt like a hearse for the past. Seattle was waking up. Joggers by the waterfront, buses sighing at stoplights, the smell of roasted beans from every corner cafe. He parked near Thornwell Tower, his company's headquarters, but didn't go in right away. He sat in the car, staring at the skyline reflected in the windshield. So much glass, so many windows, and behind each one, someone chasing something they might never catch. His phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Vale. 2 p.m. at the clinic works. "Everything all right with Aiden?" He typed back, "We'll talk in person." Before heading there, he walked into the lobby of his building. The receptionist smiled nervously. "Good morning, Mr. Thornwell. You have the quarterly review at 10. "Cancel it." "Sir?" "I said cancel it. Tell them family comes first." The words surprised even him. But as he said them, they felt right. He rode the elevator up to his private floor. His office overlooked the city and the lake beyond two worlds divided by money and memory. On his desk sat a photo of Aiden at age 3, holding a wooden plane Isabella had made. The boy's face was full of light. He stared at it until the ache in his chest turned to resolve. He picked up the phone and called an old contact, Detective Harris, a quiet man who'd once investigated Isabella's death before the hospital had ruled it complications. "Harris," the voice grumbled, still rough with sleep. "Been years, Thornwell. What's this about?" "I need the files from 8 years ago. Isabella Thornwell. The night she died." A pause. "You said you were done digging. I was wrong." Another pause. Then a sigh. "You're not gonna like what you find." "I already don't." When the call ended, Elias sat back, feeling the weight of years pressed down. Outside, the lake shimmered under the noon sun, deceptively peaceful. By 2 o'clock, he was at Vale Neurological Clinic, a low modern building with mirrored glass. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. Dr. Lauren Vale greeted him in the hallway with a polished smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Elias, so good to see you. How's our patient?" "Our patient is stable," he said evenly. "But we need to talk." She led him into her office, a bright space lined with diplomas. "Of course, I was just reviewing Aiden's latest scans. Remarkable consistency, really. The brain's adaptive response to trauma." He cut her off. "You treated Isabella before she died, didn't you?" Her smile faltered. "Well, yes. I was part of the prenatal care team." "Why?" He set the silver locket on her desk. The engraved initials, IT, caught the light. "Because she left this for me," he said quietly. "And letters. Letters that mentioned you." For a heartbeat, only the clock on the wall made a sound. Then Dr. Vale's expression shifted, small, quick, almost imperceptible, but he saw it, the kind of flicker that only guilt could cause. "Elias," she said softly, "you don't understand what was happening then. Your wife was under immense stress. She was imagining threats that weren't there, like a nurse switching her medication, or a signature she didn't authorize." She stiffened. That's ridiculous. Is it? He opened his briefcase, pulled out one of the letters, and slid it across the table. She wrote this the day before she died. She said she feared you. Vale looked down but didn't touch it. The silence thickened, like fog rolling back in over the lake. Finally, she exhaled, long and slow. You have no proof, Elias. Nothing that would hold in court. Maybe not, he said, but I don't need a courtroom. I just need the truth. Her eyes hardened. Be careful where you dig, Thornwell. Some graves don't like to be opened. He rose. Some graves are already open. Outside, the sky had turned gray again. The wind coming off the water carried a chill that bit through his coat. But for the first time in years, he felt alive. The hunt for the truth had begun, and this time, he wouldn't stop halfway. Elias drove home in silence. The wipers beat a slow rhythm against the windshield, pushing away a drizzle that never seemed to end. Every streetlight blurred into the next. Somewhere between the city and the island bridge, he realized that his hands were trembling not from fear, but from rage, so cold it felt clean. He'd seen guilt before, in boardrooms, in shareholders, in men who smiled while lying. But this was different. Dr. Vale hadn't looked surprised, she'd looked cornered. And that, he thought, meant there was more. By the time he reached the estate, the rain had eased into mist. The driveway lights shimmered off the wet stone. Inside, the house was warm and filled with the scent of cinnamon. Martha was baking again. Hazel and Aidan were at the dining table, cutting paper shapes for their airplane fleet. Aidan's laughter filled the room. Elias paused in the doorway. The sight should have brought comfort. Instead, it tightened something in his chest. He thought of Isabella's note, the locket buried beneath the roses, the doctor's careful lies. Hazel noticed him first. Mr. Thornwell, look, we made you a jet this time. It's got your initials. She held up a neatly folded blue paper plane, E.T., drawn in silver ink. He smiled faintly, taking it. That's a fine model, Captain. Aidan grinned. We're going to test it tomorrow. Maybe it'll reach the dock. Maybe it will, Elias said softly. He sat with them a while, pretending to eat while his mind raced elsewhere. He caught glimpses of Isabella everywhere, the pattern on the curtains she'd chosen, the mug Aidan used that once belonged to her, even the soft light she'd loved by the window. After the children went upstairs, he returned to his study. The letters waited on the desk, dry now but fragile. He opened the last one again. It mentioned another name, Celeste, the secretary. She had been Isabella's friend, her confidant. The woman who stayed at the hospital through labor, who comforted him afterward, who had remained by his side for months when grief nearly consumed him. His stomach turned. He remembered Vale's warning. Some graves don't like to be opened. He picked up the phone and dialed Celeste's number. It rang once, twice. Then her bright voice answered. Elias, it's been ages. How's our little man doing? Our little man is alive, he said quietly. Can we talk? Of course. I'm in the city at the gallery on Pike. Want to stop by? He hesitated. I'll be there in an hour. When he arrived, the gallery was closing. Celeste met him at the door, still elegant, still smiling, her hair now a shade lighter. You look tired, she said. Working too much again? Not enough, he replied. They walked among the paintings. Colors swirled abstract shapes, bold reds and deep blues. Elias stopped before one canvas. A burst of crimson streaked with black. Reminds me of the hospital room, he said. Celeste blinked. What? The night Isabella died. You were there, weren't you? Her smile faded. Elias. That was years ago. He turned to face her fully. She wrote your name. Silence. Then a laugh light. Practiced. Brittle. She was delirious. You know that. He stepped closer. She said you changed her medication. She said she was scared. Stop it, Celeste whispered. You were the last person to see her alive. You and Dr. Vale. Her composure cracked. Her eyes flickered with something like fear. You don't understand. Vale said it would help. Isabella was in pain. She was losing it. We thought. Elias's voice broke like ice. You thought you'd play God? Celeste shook her head, tears brimming. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Vale said it would calm her. I didn't know it would. She couldn't finish. He took a step back. the weight of the truth pressing on him like water. "You both killed her," he said softly. "And you let me believe it was nature's fault." She reached for him, desperate. "Please, Elias. It was a mistake. I loved her too. I loved—" He turned away. Don't say her name again." The gallery lights dimmed as the timer clicked off, leaving them in the glow of the exit sign. He walked out without another word. Outside, Seattle's streets gleamed under the drizzle. He stood there a moment, breathing the cold air until the shaking stopped. Then he called Detective Harris again. "I've got your proof," he said. By the time he drove back to Mercer Island, the clock had crossed midnight. Hazel's paper plane still lay scattered on the table. He picked one up, ran his thumb along its folded edge, and whispered, "Halfway farther, Bella. I'm getting there." Upstairs, Aiden murmured in his sleep. Hazel's soft laughter drifting from the guest room down the hall. The house that had once felt like a tomb now held something fragile but alive, truth breaking through the cracks like morning light. Dawn came gray and hesitant over Lake Washington. The fog had rolled back in during the night, draping the Thornwell estate in a ghostly hush. Inside, the fireplace still glowed faintly from the embers Elias had left burning. He hadn't slept. The letters, the confession, the faces of Vale and Celeste all circled in his mind like restless spirits. At 6, his phone buzzed. "Detective Harris." "Got something," the voice rasped. "Hospital logs, 2016. You'd better sit down. I'm listening." Vale's signature appears on every one of Isabella's charts, including a dosage sheet changed an hour before delivery. Morphine levels off the chart. There's more, a name signed under witness in the corner. Celeste. Bingo. Elias closed his eyes. The sound of the detective's pen scratching notes on the other end felt louder than the rain against the windows. "Can you get me copies?" "Already sent." "But Elias, this isn't just malpractice. If you push this, you'll drag your company, your family, everyone into the storm." Elias stared at the lake, a calm mirror reflecting nothing. "It's already dragging me." He ended the call and sat there in silence until Martha's soft knock pulled him back. "Sir, Hazel's fixing breakfast with Aiden. You should come eat something." "I will," he said automatically, but his voice sounded far away. When he finally stepped into the kitchen, the smell of pancakes and maple syrup filled the air. Hazel stood on a stool, flipping one with awkward precision, while Aiden counted 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi beside her. "Good morning, Mr. Thornwell," she said brightly. "We're testing our cooking skills today. Grandma's supervising." He smiled, despite the ache behind his eyes. "Looks professional to me." Aiden grinned. "Hazel says if I eat enough pancakes, I'll walk sooner." "Is that doctor approved?" Elias asked gently. Hazel shrugged. "It's happiness approved." He laughed softly. "Then I can't argue with that." They ate together, sunlight just beginning to pierce the fog. For a few minutes, the world outside didn't exist, only butter, syrup, and laughter. But as Aiden's smile widened, Elias's guilt deepened. His son deserved a childhood, untouched by shadows. And yet here he was, dragging those shadows back into daylight. After breakfast, Martha took the children to the library in town. Elias stood by the doorway watching them leave. The house fell quiet again, except for the soft tick of the old clock. He went to his study, opened his laptop, and found the files Harris had sent. There it was, Isabella Thornwell, patient record, 7,846 to 2,016. Morphine, 200 milligrams, double the prescribed dose. Signature, Dr. Lauren Vale. Witness, Celeste Ryan. He read the page 3 times before the numbers stopped making sense. Then he opened a new email to his attorney, attached the files, and typed just one line. "Prepare a statement. Truth only." But his hands hovered over the keyboard before hitting send. He thought of Aiden's soft voice the night before. "Do you think Mom can see us?" If he went public, every network, every newspaper would devour their story. His son's name, his wife's death, turned into headlines. He closed the laptop slowly. Some truths, he realized, had to be carried with dignity, not broadcast with noise. The phone rang again. Hazel's voice, quick and breathless. "Mr. Thornwell, we found something weird at the library." "What is it, sweetheart?" "There's an old newspaper from when your company opened the hospital wing. It has a picture of Dr. Vale and a man named Jonathan Brooke, my grandpa. Did you know him?" Elias froze. "Jonathan Brooke?" "Yeah. Grandma said he worked maintenance at the hospital before he got sick." He sat down heavily. Hazel's grandfather. The connection cut through him like lightning. Fate, it seemed, had never stopped weaving the same threads. "Listen, Hazel," he said carefully. "Don't tell anyone about that photo yet, okay? Just bring it home when you can." "Okay, Grandma's making cookies, so we'll be back soon." The call ended. Elias leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The coincidence was too sharp, too perfect. A maintenance man, a buried locket, a child who wandered into his son's life as if sent by something unseen. He whispered to the empty room, "Bella, did you send her?" The question lingered in the air like incense. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing a pale sky streaked with sunlight. He could hear the faint hum of a fairy horn across the lake, a reminder that life went on even for the broken. But he knew the peace wouldn't last. Somewhere across town, Vale and Celeste would have heard of his inquiries by now. Somewhere, the past was stirring. He poured another cup of coffee, black and strong, and waited for the next storm to arrive. By late afternoon, the calm had dissolved. The wind had turned sharp, rattling the old windows of the Thornwell house. Clouds gathered over Lake Washington again, heavy and bruised. The light through the glass went from gold to gray in minutes. Martha returned with the children just as the first drops began to fall. Hazel burst into the foyer, cheeks flushed, her backpack clutched tight. "I found the article, Mr. Thornwell," she said, breathless. "See? My grandpa's name right next to Dr. Vale's." Elias crouched to take it from her. The paper was yellowed, the photograph grainy. There they were, Vale smiling for the camera, and beside her a man in work overalls. "Jonathan Brooke, facility supervisor. Your grandpa worked at the same hospital?" he asked softly. Hazel nodded proudly. "He fixed the elevator that week. Grandma says he always talked about that night. He came home really sad, said a lady died and nobody cared." Elias's pulse quickened. "Did he ever say why?" "No," Hazel said, frowning. "Just that he saw someone crying near the medicine room. A woman with red nails. Grandma said he couldn't sleep for days." "Celeste." Elias's breath caught. He stared at the image again, realization spreading like fire. Fate hadn't just nudged Hazel into their lives. It had brought her here to finish what her grandfather had seen. He rose slowly, folding the paper. "Thank you, Hazel. You did something very brave today." Her eyes widened. "Was it bad?" He knelt to meet her gaze. "It was important. Sometimes those are the same thing." Martha called from the kitchen. "Dinner in 10, everyone." Aiden wheeled over. "Dad, you okay? You look like when you read the news." Elias smiled faintly. "Just remembering someone." When the children went upstairs later, he called Harris again. "I've got a witness. A man named Jonathan Brooke worked at the hospital the night Isabella died. He saw something." Harris rustled papers on the other end. "Brooke. Yeah, that name's in the old maintenance log. Died 5 years ago. Heart failure. But if he talked to anyone—" "His granddaughter's here," Elias interrupted. "She found his picture. He told his wife something before he died about seeing someone in the medicine room that night." Harris whistled softly. "You've got yourself a trail, Thornwell. You sure you want to follow it?" "I don't have a choice." The detective's tone softened. "Then watch your back. Vale's still connected. People like her don't fall quietly." After the call, Elias stood by the window, watching the rain blur the reflection of his own face. Lightning flashed over the water, and for an instant, he saw not his own image, but Isabella's. Her smile faint, her eyes forgiving. He whispered, "Almost there, Bella. Almost." A sound behind him made him turn. Hazel stood in the doorway again, holding one of her paper planes. "Mr. Thornwell," she said quietly, "are you crying?" He smiled through the tears. "Maybe just raining on the inside." She stepped closer. The paper plane held out. "Grandma says when grown-ups cry, they're fixing something broken." He took the little plane, hands shaking. "Your grandma's a wise woman." Hazel tilted her head. "You're fixing something too, huh?" "I'm trying," she nodded solemnly. "Then you'll need a pilot." Elias laughed softly. "And who might that be?" "Me," she said, slipping her small hand into his. "You drive too slow." He couldn't help but laugh, real laughter this time. The kind that carried through the empty halls. For the first time in years, he let someone hold his hand without fear of breaking. That night, after the children were asleep, he sat by the fire with a drink he didn't finish. Outside, thunder rolled across the lake. Inside, the silence felt different, alive, waiting. He looked at the old letters again, the fading ink, now symbols of both love and loss. The last one bore a single line in Isabella's handwriting he hadn't noticed before, tucked along the edge of the page. Truth is love's last act. He traced the words with his thumb. The message was clear. It wasn't revenge he was after, it was closure. For Isabella, for Aiden, for himself. In the distance, a siren wailed faintly through the storm, swallowed by the wind. Elias rose, slipped the letters back into the drawer, and turned off the light. Tomorrow, he would face Vale again, not as a grieving husband, but as a man finally ready to forgive what forgiveness could not erase. The next morning broke with clear skies for the first time in weeks. Sunlight shimmered across Lake Washington, catching on the ripples like shards of glass. Elias sat on the porch steps, coffee steaming in his hands, listening to the sound of gulls and distant traffic from the bridge. The peace felt borrowed, too fragile to trust. His phone buzzed. Detective Harris again. "You'd better sit for this," the detective said without preamble. "We ran those signatures through handwriting verification. Vale didn't just sign off the dosage. She also filed an insurance claim under Isabella's name after she died." Elias stiffened. "What kind of claim?" "Experimental pharmaceutical trial, privately funded. The drug administered during delivery wasn't even approved yet. The report says, maternal testing phase." He swallowed hard. "She used my wife as an experiment. That's what it looks like. We're moving to open a full investigation. You might get called in for questioning." Elias exhaled slowly. "Do what you have to do. Just keep my son out of the spotlight." When the call ended, he sat for a long time without moving. The world around him was bright, calm, indifferent. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere, children rode bikes down the street. And in his chest, something quiet cracked. He went back inside, where Aiden was in the living room with Hazel, building a tower of wooden blocks. Hazel's laughter floated up like birdsong. "You're cheating," she said as Aiden carefully balanced one more block. "I'm winning." Aiden corrected, grinning. Elias smiled faintly. "That looks dangerously tall, champ." "Not if you believe in physics," Aiden said, repeating something he'd heard from Dr. Patel during therapy. Hazel giggled. He knelt beside them, watching the tower sway. Then for the first time, Aiden looked up and asked, "Dad, when Mom died, were you with her?" Elias froze. Hazel's laughter faded into silence. "Why do you ask that?" "I had a dream last night," Aiden said softly. "She was calling you, but you couldn't hear her. She said, 'Tell him it wasn't his fault.'" Elias swallowed hard. "She really said that?" Aiden nodded. "I think she's happy now. She said we'll all be okay. But she also said something else." "What?" Elias whispered. "She said, 'Don't let anger raise my boy.'" The words hit him like a confession. He brushed Aiden's hair gently. "Your mom was right," he said. "She usually was." Hazel smiled. "I think moms have a rule book or something." He laughed weakly. "If they do, I wish they'd left a copy." The moment broke when Martha hurried in from the kitchen, her face pale. "Mr. Thornwell," she said urgently. "The hospital just called. Dr. Vale, she's outside." Elias rose instantly. "Here? She says she needs to speak with you. Alone." Hazel's eyes widened. "Is she in trouble?" He gave her a reassuring smile. "Not your concern, sweetheart. Stay with Martha." Outside, Vale stood by the gate, her white coat gone, her hair pulled into a tight knot. She looked smaller than he remembered, like someone already half erased. "Elias," she said quietly, "please don't hang up this time." He didn't move. "You should be in custody." "They're coming for me soon," she said. "But before that happens, you need to know Celeste lied to you. She wanted you to find me." He frowned. "Why?" Vale looked toward the lake. "Because she's dying, and she thinks confession equals redemption. She wanted to drag me down with her." "I don't care about your feud," Elias said sharply. "You experimented on my wife. You crippled my son." Vale's eyes filled with tears. "No, Elias. I tried to save them. Celeste was the one who administered the dose. I found out too late." He hesitated. The lie or truth hung between them like fog. You expect me to believe that? I expect nothing, she said quietly. But if you want the full story, go to Street Augustine's clinic in Tacoma. File 214B. That's where the real records are. Before he could answer, a black sedan pulled up behind her. 2 plainclothes officers stepped out. Dr. Lauren Vale? She nodded. I won't resist. Then she turned to Elias, her voice trembling. Your wife was stronger than any of us knew. Whatever happened to your boy, it's not over. There's hope. They led her into the car. The doors shut with a dull thud, and the sedan rolled away. Elias stood in the driveway, wind tugging at his coat. He felt neither victory nor peace, only exhaustion. Every new truth bled into another lie, and every lie carried another truth. Inside, Hazel peeked through the window. Is she gone? Yes, Elias said softly. For now. Then maybe things can get better, she said. He wanted to believe her, but deep down, he knew the storm was only shifting shape. As night fell, he found himself standing by Aiden's bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his son's chest. The monitor beeped softly beside him. Dr. Patel had increased the neural treatment intensity. Aiden's body trembled once, then relaxed. Elias whispered, You're gonna make it, son. I'll make sure you do. He turned off the bedside lamp and walked out, unaware that tomorrow would bring the truth that would shatter him completely and begin his real redemption. That night, thunder rolled like distant drums across the lake. Elias woke to the sound of the monitor beeping faster than usual. He was out of bed before thought caught up, crossing the hall to Aiden's room. The boy's small frame trembled under the sheets. Sweat beaded his forehead, his breaths shallow and fast. Dad, he gasped, voice barely a whisper. Elias hit the call button for the in-home nurse, panic clawing at his chest. Aiden, stay with me. The nurse rushed in, checking vitals, adjusting the line. Heart rate spiking. Could be neural shock from last stimulation round. Fix it, Elias said, voice rough. We're trying. He could do nothing but hold his son's hand. Aiden's fingers were cold, his lips pale. Somewhere in that chaos, Elias realized he was whispering the same prayer Isabella once said during storms. Please, just let him stay. Minutes stretched. The beeping steadied, slowed. Aiden's breathing evened out. The nurse nodded. Crisis past. He needs rest. No more sessions tonight. When she left, Elias sat beside the bed, head in his hands. The house was silent except for the rain outside, tapping the glass like hesitant fingers. From the doorway came a small voice. Mr. Thornwell? Hazel stood there in her nightgown, clutching a paper plane. Her eyes were wide but steady. It's okay, he said hoarsely. Go back to bed. She shook her head. You look like you need a friend. He almost told her no, but something in her tone stopped him. She walked over, climbed into the chair beside him, and placed the paper plane on Aiden's nightstand. This one's for flying up, she whispered, in case he needs to send a message to his mom. The simple kindness broke him. His throat closed, tears spilling before he could stop them. Hazel reached for his sleeve. Grandma says crying's how we make room for more love. Elias laughed through the tears. She's right again. They sat there together while the storm eased. Outside, lightning faded into soft drizzle. Inside, something shifted, a fragile, healing, quiet. After a while, Hazel's head drooped against his arm. He carried her to the guest room, tucked her in, and stood watching for a long time. Her courage, her gentleness, it felt like the universe's way of returning what had been stolen from him. Back in Aiden's room, he found the boy awake, eyes half open. Dad? I'm here. Was I dying? Elias swallowed. You were fighting. But you won. Aiden's lips curved weakly. Mom said in my dream that you'd fix everything if you just remembered to listen. Listen to what? A faint smile. Love. Elias's chest tightened. He brushed a strand of hair from his son's forehead. Then I'll listen harder. Aiden sighed and drifted back to sleep. Elias stepped outside onto the porch. The storm had passed. The air smelled of pine and rain. Somewhere in the dark water below, the moon's reflection rippled like a heartbeat. He realized then that forgiveness wasn't something given, it was something lived. Hazel's small hand, Aiden's dream, Isabella's note, all pieces of a puzzle leading him back to Grace. When he finally went inside, he paused by the hallway mirror. The man staring back looked older, worn but no longer hollow. There was light behind the fatigue, the faint outline of the father he'd promised to become. Upstairs, the clock chimed 3. In the quiet house, Elias whispered to the still air, "We're almost there, Bella. I won't stop now." The morning after the storm was crystal clear. The lake shimmered under sunlight so bright it almost hurt to look at. From the porch, Elias could see sailboats gliding far in the distance, white sails like quiet prayers stitched against the blue. He stood there for a long time before he finally moved. The night had drained him, but there was no turning back. Vale's words still echoed. "Go to Street Augustine's Clinic in Tacoma. File 214. B." He left a note for Martha, kissed Aiden's forehead, and told Hazel he'd be home before dinner. "Can I come?" she'd asked, eyes bright. "Not today," he said gently. "This one's for grown-ups." She looked disappointed but nodded. "Then bring back a story." He promised he would. The drive to Tacoma took 2 hours. The highway unwound through pine forests and open water views. Every mile felt like peeling back another layer of memory. When the hospital finally came into view, its old stone facade looked almost like a cathedral, aged, dignified, holding too many secrets. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and history. The clerk at records, a gray-haired woman with half-moon glasses, peered at the slip of paper he handed her. "File 214. B, huh? That's an old one. Locked archive. Can I access it?" Elias asked. "Only family of the patient or legal representative." "I'm both," he said quietly. "Elias Thornwell, husband of Isabella Thornwell." Her eyes softened. "Give me a moment." She disappeared behind the counter. Minutes passed. Then she returned, carrying a thin, sealed envelope. "You didn't hear this from me," she whispered. "But some things deserve to see daylight." Elias took it carefully. "Thank you." He found a quiet bench near the courtyard and opened the envelope. Inside was a single folder, stamped Confidential Experimental Pharmacology Unit. The first page was a report signed by Dr. Lauren Vale, handwriting unmistakable. He began to read. Subject: Isabella Thornwell, admitted under prenatal monitoring for neural enhancement trial, Project Lux. Drug administered to stimulate fetal brain response. Risk level: high. Rationale: potential hereditary link between mother's genetic resilience and fetal neural adaptability. Outcome: mother exhibited severe rejection symptoms. Fetal viability sustained. Recommend follow-up study upon birth. Elias's breath caught. Neural enhancement. Fetal adaptability. It wasn't just malpractice, it was genetic experimentation. They had turned his wife and unborn son into subjects. But there was more. A second document, handwritten in a different script. Vale's private note. Patient suspects tampering. Displays unexpected resistance to sedatives. Request to terminate project denied by Celeste Ryan. Ryan claims investor insists continuation. Funding source unknown. Possible connection. Brook Foundation. He froze. Brook. Hazel's last name. His mind reeled. Jonathan Brook, the maintenance worker, wasn't just staff. His family name was tied to the same foundation funding the experiment. He flipped to the last page. There, clipped to the report, was a photograph. A young researcher team in front of the same hospital wing. Vale, Celeste, Morrison, and in the corner, barely visible, Jonathan Brook. Elias leaned back, staring at the image. "It's all connected," he whispered. Across the courtyard, church bells chimed 11 times. He folded the papers, heart pounding, and called Detective Harris. "Tom, it wasn't just Vale or Celeste. There's a foundation behind this Brook Foundation. They financed the whole thing." "Brook Foundation?" Harris repeated. "That's an old biotech front, shut down years ago. Why?" "They used Isabella's pregnancy for a neural study. My wife and son were experiments." There was a long silence. "Elias, you need to bring that file straight to me. Don't copy it, don't send it. Trust no one. I'm on my way." He hung up and started toward the parking lot. But halfway across the courtyard, a figure stepped out from behind the fountain. Celeste. Her face was drawn, pale. "You found it, didn't you?" she said softly. Elias stopped dead. "You followed me," she nodded. "I had to see your face when you learned. You deserve to know everything." His voice was ice. "Then talk." Celeste took a shaky breath. The Brooke Foundation funded Vale's project. Jonathan Brooke wasn't just maintenance, he was their liaison. He didn't know the full extent until it was too late. When Isabella died, he tried to expose us. The stress killed him. Elias's hands tightened around the folder. "And you expect forgiveness?" "No," she said, tears forming. "But you deserve to understand. Aiden's paralysis, it wasn't permanent. The drug changed his brain. He's extraordinary, Elias. You'll see. That little girl Hazel, she's proof. Her grandfather's work wasn't all evil. He wanted to heal the damage done. That's why she's drawn to Aiden. They're connected." He stared at her. "Connected how?" But before she could answer, a security guard appeared. "Sir, you can't be here without clearance." Celeste turned away. "Read the rest of the file," she said quickly. "It's all there, I'm sorry." Then she was gone, swallowed by the hospital corridor. Elias stood there for a long moment, the folder heavy in his hands, the air around him humming with questions. The sunlight suddenly felt colder. He looked down at the last line, scribbled in Vale's pen, one he hadn't noticed before. Subject's offspring may exhibit advanced cognitive perception. Watch for heightened empathy. He thought of Hazel the way she saw connections no one else did, the way she'd found that locket buried in the mud. It hit him like lightning. She wasn't just a coincidence. She was part of the same experiment. The past hadn't only shaped his son, it had brought the little girl who would save him. Elias drove back toward Seattle with the file on the seat beside him. The world outside blurred into streaks of gray and gold trees, water, highway signs, all flashing past like half-remembered dreams. The pages inside that envelope might as well have been fire. Every word burned into his mind. When he reached Mercer Island, Harris was already waiting by the gate, leaning against an unmarked sedan. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said quietly. "I've seen something worse," Elias replied, handing him the folder. "They didn't just hurt my wife. They created her replacement." Harris frowned, flipping through the papers. "You mean Hazel?" "She's connected, Tom. The Brooke Foundation's research neural development, fetal mapping. Hazel's grandfather worked on it. She was born months after the program shut down. Look at this. He pointed to a line near the end of the file. Prototype subject B, unregistered. Data lost following lab closure. B for Brooke, Elias whispered. Harris exhaled slowly. Jesus, this is bigger than either of us. Elias turned toward the house. Through the living room window, he could see Hazel and Aiden bent over a drawing book, heads close together, laughing. The sight tore at him, innocence built on sins of science. "I can't let them near any of this," he said. "They deserve peace." Then don't, Harris said simply. "Let us handle it. You've done enough." But Elias shook his head. "It's not over. There's one more thing I need to know if Hazel's gift came from what they did to my wife's bloodline. If Isabella's strength somehow saved that child too." Harris studied him. "You're not going to find peace digging into more graves." "Maybe not," Elias said, "but I might find purpose." Later that evening, while Martha prepared dinner, Elias sat with Hazel in the den. She was coloring quietly, humming to herself a tune he recognized faintly. It was the lullaby Isabella used to sing to Aiden. He asked softly, "Where did you learn that song?" Hazel looked up surprised. "I don't know. It just comes in my head sometimes." He smiled faintly. "It used to be your friend's mother's favorite." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Really." She looked thoughtful for a moment. "Maybe she taught it to me in a dream. Sometimes I hear voices when I'm almost asleep. They don't scare me. They just sound kind." Elias's throat tightened. "Maybe that's because kind people never really leave." Hazel nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Mr. Thornwell, when Aiden walks again, can we plant more roses for his mom? The pink ones, like in my grandma's yard." He couldn't speak for a moment. "Yes, sweetheart," he said finally. "We'll plant a whole garden." After dinner, when the children were in bed, Harris called. "We traced the Brooke Foundation's assets. Shell companies all dissolved, but there's one trust still active in Hazel's name. Set up anonymously 8 years ago. Elias's hand tightened on the phone. 8 years. That's the year Isabella died. Exactly. Whoever did this made sure Hazel would be cared for. Maybe as penance, maybe as insurance. We'll dig deeper, but Elias, you might never get all the answers. He looked through the window toward the garden where the locket had been found. The moonlight soft over the ivy wall. Then I'll settle for the truth that matters, he said. When the call ended, he went upstairs to check on the children. Hazel was asleep, one arm draped over her stuffed rabbit. Aiden was awake, whispering to her in the dark. "Dad?" he said when Elias stepped in. "Hazel said she had a dream. Mom told her to tell me something." Elias sat on the edge of the bed. "What did she say?" "That I'm not broken," Aiden murmured. "That she made me special so I could help people one day. She said Hazel's here to remind me." He brushed a hand through his son's hair. "She's right, you know." Aiden smiled sleepily. "Then I'll help her too." Elias watched them, both two children from the same tragedy, now bound by something larger than science, larger than loss. Downstairs, the envelope still lay open on his desk. He picked up the final page again, the one that mentioned heightened empathy. The word glowed in the lamplight like a benediction. Maybe that was the real miracle. Not the science, not the experiments, not the answers. Empathy. The ability to feel someone else's pain and choose to heal it. He folded the file, locked it away, and turned out the light. Upstairs, the wind carried faint laughter through the hall. Aiden's soft and Hazel's bright, two threads weaving a single melody. Elias smiled to himself. The past had taken everything, but somehow, through these children, it had also given something back. A second chance to love without fear. By early spring, Seattle began to thaw. The gray rain turned soft and shimmering, and magnolias bloomed along the roads like pale lanterns. Life inside the Thornwell estate followed a rhythm again: morning therapy, afternoon tutoring, and quiet dinners where laughter slowly began to sound natural. Elias still rose before dawn each day, walking the garden where Isabella's roses had begun to bud again. He often found Hazel there too, sitting cross-legged in her yellow raincoat, talking softly to the flowers as if they listened. "Morning, Captain Hazel," he'd greet her. She'd grin. "Morning, Commander Thornwell. The troops are doing great, no weeds," survived the night. Her brightness had become part of the house itself. Sometimes Elias wondered if the walls remembered her laughter now, the way they once remembered grief. Downstairs, Aiden was preparing for another round of neural therapy. Dr. Patel and a new specialist, Dr. Chen, recommended by Harris, had designed a revised protocol based on the records recovered from Tacoma. "It's risky," Dr. Chen warned. "But if the new mapping works, we might stimulate dormant pathways. It won't be easy for him." Elias looked at his son, already strapped into the harness. "He's stronger than he looks." Aiden smiled faintly. "Can we start, Doc? Hazel promised to build me a trophy if I stand up today." Hazel clapped from the corner, made from popsicle sticks and pure glory. The doctor chuckled and activated the monitor. Electrodes blinked to life along Aiden's legs, a slow pulse building rhythmically. The boy flinched, breathing hard. Elias moved closer. "You're okay, son. Breathe." Aiden's hands tightened around the bars. The machine hummed louder. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a small twitch, the faintest movement, in his left foot. Hazel gasped. "Did you see that?" Elias's throat closed. "Do it again, buddy. You've got this." Another pulse. This time the right foot jerked. Stronger. The doctors exchanged quick glances. "Neurological response confirmed," Dr. Chen said, barely containing her excitement. "It's working." The next 10 minutes blurred into tears, laughter, and exhausted joy. When the session ended, Aiden collapsed into Elias's arms, trembling but grinning. "I felt it, Dad," he whispered. "I really felt it." Elias held him tight. "You did more than feel it. You made it happen." Hazel ran forward, holding up her half-finished trophy. "Victory for Team Aiden!" The room erupted with laughter, a sound so pure and alive that even Dr. Chen wiped her eyes. Later, when the doctors had gone, the children insisted on celebrating with ice cream and a movie night. Elias didn't argue. For the first time in nearly a decade, the house felt like a home again. After the movie, Hazel fell asleep, curled against Aiden's wheelchair. The boy was still awake, tracing shapes in the air. "What are you drawing?" Elias asked softly. "A bridge," Aiden murmured. "Between Mom's heaven and here. Hazel says if you build it in your heart, they can cross any time they want." Elias swallowed hard. "Then she's smarter than both of us!" He looked at his son, at the courage that had replaced fear, and realized that healing wasn't about walking, it was about learning to live unafraid again. That night, long after everyone slept, he sat alone on the porch. The lake shimmered under the moon. He took out Isabella's locket, rubbed his thumb over the inscription, and whispered, "He's walking, Bella. Not far yet, but he's walking." Somewhere in the quiet, a breeze lifted soft, almost like an answer. A week later, under a soft April sun, Elias decided it was time. The roses behind the house had fully bloomed pale pink and white, their scent drifting through the morning air. He stood by the car, fastening Aiden's seatbelt while Hazel bounced beside them with a small basket of flowers. "Are we going far, Mr. Thornwell?" "Not far," Elias said. "Just somewhere we should have gone long ago." The drive to Greenwood Cemetery was quiet. Seattle shimmered under a pale blue sky, and the city seemed gentler that morning, as if it, too, had been waiting for this. Hazel hummed softly in the back seat, clutching her basket. Aiden stared out the window, eyes shining with both nerves and determination. When they arrived, the wind carried the faint sound of chimes from the chapel nearby. The path wound between oak trees, sunlight dappling the grass. Elias parked near the Thornwell family plot. For a moment, he couldn't move. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Hazel leaned forward. "Want me to hold your hand?" He smiled through the ache. "You're braver than you know, Hazel Brooke." She grinned. "That's what Grandma says." Together, they made their way down the gravel path. Elias pushed Aiden's wheelchair until the boy insisted, "Let me try." With trembling arms, Aiden gripped the rims of his wheels and rolled himself forward, inch by inch, breath ragged but steady. Hazel walked beside him, steadying the chair when it tilted. At the top of the hill stood a simple marble headstone engraved with a single name, Isabella Grace Thornwell, 1988, 2016. Beloved wife, devoted mother, unbroken spirit. Elias's throat closed. For years, he had visited this grave in silence, saying nothing. Today, he felt ready to speak. He knelt beside the stone. The roses Hazel had brought glowed faintly in the afternoon light. "Bella," he whispered, "I was lost for a long time. I thought forgiveness meant forgetting, but it doesn't. It means remembering with peace." His voice faltered. "You were braver than all of us. You saved him. You saved Aiden." Aiden's hand trembled as he reached out, touching the stone. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "I walked a little today. I'm going to walk more soon. I promise." Hazel knelt beside him, placing one flower at the base of the headstone. "Mrs. Thornwell," she said shyly, "I've been taking care of them like my mama said you wanted. And we're going to keep planting roses for you every spring." Elias turned away, overcome. The sight of the two children kneeling there, the living proof of survival, of grace, was more than his heart could hold. He wiped his eyes and looked toward the sky. The clouds had parted, sunlight streaming down in soft golden shafts. "You see them, don't you?" he whispered. "Our family. The one you left behind, and the one you somehow sent to us." A breeze rose, scattering petals across the grass. Hazel gasped. "She's listening." Elias smiled. "Yeah, she always did." They stayed there for a long time, Aiden tracing the carved letters, Hazel humming softly, Elias resting his hand on the stone. The pain was still there, but it no longer felt like a wound. It felt like memory, tender and alive. As they prepared to leave, Aiden turned to his father. "Can we come back every week, Dad? I want to tell her when I walk on my own." Elias nodded, voice low. "Every week, son, as long as you want." Hazel reached for his hand, her small fingers warm against his. "She's proud of you," she said simply. He looked at the two of them, the boy he'd nearly lost, the girl who had somehow found them, and felt the weight of years lift from his chest. On the drive home, Hazel dozed off in the back seat, her basket empty except for one rose she'd kept for herself. Aiden sat quietly, watching the clouds drift by. Elias drove with the windows down, the scent of roses following them all the way back to the lake. And for the first time in 8 long years, he didn't feel haunted. He felt home. Summer arrived on Mercer Island, with soft gold mornings and the hum of life returning. The lake glittered under sunlight, children's laughter echoing from the nearby docks. For the first time in years, the Thornwell house felt alive again, not just occupied, but lived in. Martha hung bright curtains in the kitchen. Hazel painted the porch swing pale blue. "For hope," she said, while Aiden, now able to stand with braces, insisted on helping, even if he only managed to hold the paintbrush. Elias often watched them from the doorway, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. There was a lightness in his step these days, a peace that didn't come from answers but from acceptance. Every morning, he and Aiden worked through physical therapy. Each step was hard-won, every movement slow, but the boy's determination never faltered. Hazel sat nearby with her sketchbook, chronicling everything. "So the world remembers," she said. One morning, after weeks of effort, Aiden took 3 steps on his own. Not perfect, not steady, but his own. Hazel dropped her sketchbook, squealing, "He did it! Mr. Thornwell, he did it!" Elias rushed forward, catching his son before he could fall. Aiden laughed breathlessly. "Did you see, Dad? I walked, and I saw, son," Elias said, voice trembling. "And so did your mom." The house erupted in cheers. Even Martha cried as she clapped from the kitchen doorway. Hazel danced around the room, waving her sketchbook like a victory flag. That night, Elias sat by the lake alone. The water shimmered silver under the moon. He could still hear the echo of laughter inside the sound of life, of hope renewed. He took out the old locket and opened it once more. The tiny photograph of Isabella smiled back at him, ageless, serene. "Bella," he whispered. "He walked today, and Hazel, she's like sunlight after the longest storm. I think you sent her to us. Maybe you knew we'd need her." He let the locket fall against his chest, cool and familiar. "We're okay now. Not fixed, not perfect, but okay." Behind him, the screen door creaked open. Hazel's small voice broke the stillness. "You're talking to her again, aren't you?" Elias turned, smiling. "I guess I am. Can you tell her something for me?" Hazel said, stepping closer. "Of course. Tell her thank you for picking us." The words struck him with simple grace. He pulled her into a hug, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll tell her every day." They stood together, the night quiet, except for the gentle lapping of water against the dock. Hazel looked up at the sky. "Do you think she sees us?" "I think she never stopped," Elias said. "Sometimes love doesn't end. It just changes where it lives." Hazel nodded thoughtfully. "Like the stars. They're still shining even when we can't see them." "Exactly like that," he said, smiling through the ache in his throat. From the house came Aiden's faint voice calling their names. Hazel ran ahead, barefoot, her laughter carrying across the lawn. Elias followed, slower, watching her silhouette against the porch light small, fearless, glowing. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man walking toward a memory. He felt like a man walking home. By late August, the town held its annual Summer by the Lake Festival, an old Mercer Island tradition, with food stalls, music, and boats decorated with ribbons drifting lazily under the Sunday. For years, Elias had avoided it. This time, he accepted the invitation. Martha packed sandwiches. Hazel painted little wooden hearts to sell at the children's booth. And Aiden, beaming, insisted on wearing the same blue braces that helped him walk. The festival buzzed with laughter and the scent of grilled corn. Musicians played near the docks. Children chased bubbles across the grass. Hazel tugged on Elias's sleeve. "They're doing the lantern release tonight. You said your wife liked those." "She did," he said softly. "She said lanterns carry wishes faster than prayers." As the sun dipped low, the crowd gathered by the water. Each family received a small paper lantern. Elias helped Aiden steady his, while Hazel decorated theirs with tiny drawings, roses, stars, and the words, "Thank you for finding us." When the first lanterns lifted into the dusk, Elias felt something stir in him. Not grief, not longing, but a gentle fullness. The sky filled with light, Hundreds of soft glowing hearts drifting over the lake. Aiden took a deep breath. Dad? Yes, son. Can I try to walk to the edge? Elias hesitated, then nodded. I've got you. With the crowd watching, Aiden took one step, then another, his hands trembling but steady. The wooden dock creaked beneath them. Hazel clapped, tears shining in her eyes. You're doing it, she shouted. By the time Aiden reached the railing, even strangers were cheering. Elias stood behind him, unable to speak. The lantern light reflected on the water soft, golden, endless. Aiden whispered, Do you think Mom can see? Elias's voice broke. I think she's right here, buddy. They released their lantern together. It drifted upward, joining the hundreds above, its reflection trembling like a second sun on the water's surface. Hazel slipped her hand into his. It's beautiful, she murmured. He nodded. It's everything. For a while, they stood there, a father, a son, and a little girl who had become part of their story. Around them, the night pulsed with laughter, music, and the quiet hum of life carrying on. Elias looked out over the lake and finally understood what Isabella had meant when she wrote, Truth is love's last act. The truth hadn't destroyed him. It had delivered him here to this light, this peace, this family. As the festival wound down, Hazel curled up beside Aiden, who was proudly retelling the moment he walked like a champion. Martha waved from the picnic tables, calling them to head home. Elias lingered one last time by the dock, gazing at the floating lanterns. They drifted farther and farther until they became tiny stars swallowed by the dark. He smiled. Good night, Bella, he whispered. You can rest now. We're all right. The wind carried the faintest scent of roses across the water. When he turned toward the laughter behind him, it wasn't the sound of ghosts anymore. It was the sound of life, whole and forgiving. And as the final lanterns disappeared into the sky, Elias Thornwell knew one truth beyond doubt. Sometimes the miracle isn't who we lose or find, it's who we become after love teaches us how to begin again. The house by the lake grew quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now, not the hollow echo of loss, but the stillness that follows healing. You could almost hear the memory of laughter caught in the curtains, the rhythm of a boy's first steps, and the soft hum of a little girl's voice singing to the roses. Life had not given Elias Thornwell back what he lost, but it had given him something rarer, the chance to love without fear, to forgive without forgetting. That, perhaps, was the truest miracle of all. This story reminds us that redemption is never about erasing the past. It's about learning to walk beside it. Love, when it's unconditional, has the power to mend what time and regret have broken. In a world that often measures success in money or titles, it's easy to forget that the real wealth lies in who waits for us at the dinner table, a child's laughter, a partner's patience, the warmth of being needed. Happiness doesn't always arrive with triumph. Sometimes it comes quietly, like sunlight spilling across a worn kitchen floor, touching everything we once thought was beyond repair. Maybe you felt that too, that fragile grace that comes when someone forgives you even before you ask. It's the same grace that keeps families together, that lets old friends reconcile, that helps a grandfather call his son after years of silence. Like the soft glow of a lamp left burning in the window for a traveler coming home. One simple act of kindness can guide us through the darkest roads of life. So tonight, as you finish this story, maybe pour yourself a cup of tea. Look out at the quiet street and remember someone you once loved enough to forgive. The years pass quickly, but the heart remembers. And when it does, it's never too late to begin again. If this story touched your heart, press 1 inch the comments. And if it didn't, or you'd like to share your thoughts, press 0 and tell us what part you'd change. Because stories like this only live on when they help us talk to one another, reminding us that love in all its messy, stubborn beauty is still the greatest thing we'll ever have.